And good evening. We are back with Crone's Crucible. Welcome all. We are at a high point of a court case. We'll see what happens with the case of the Midnight Murders tonight. How y'all doing?
Tired.
Dandy.
Ready to play D&D.
Recovering.
Are you ready to rumble?
Of course.
Okay, a little adjustment on videos here and we'll be set to go.
Do we have a choice?
No.
Oh, we always have a choice, dearie. We just have to make sure it's the right one.
Yeah.
I like to go left a lot.
There, I think I've got my voice down where I'm not going to blast everybody off of the video. A little better. My video always comes across way louder than everybody else's, so I have to tune it way down. Okay, when we last saw our intrepid crew, they had gone into a courtroom where somebody or other had tried to slip a fast one in and get the court date moved up. So hopefully nobody would testify, but thanks to friends in the neighborhood, they got wind of the court date being moved and managed to arrive so that there was no default. A gentleman in the front row on the opposite side, Lord Zord, got up and tried to claim that the case should be dismissed and various things. However, he was overruled and the case is going to continue. So at this point, the magister at the top of the set of people that are in the courtroom, who has been identified as Magister Zastro, stands up, clacks his staff of office 3 times on the floor and declares that the case of Waterdeep versus Soluun in a case of potential murder is now in order. He asks each side if they are prepared to proceed with the case, and the barristers on both sides state their agreement with such, at which point he turns to the 4 judges who are seated with him, calls them by name. You can see their names that I think I tried to make them all visible so you could see them. Lord Aegis Humphreys, Lady Elsinore, Lady Veritas Adele, and Lord Dundray are all called by name. Then he calls on the gods of Tyr and Ogma, the gods of justice, knowledge, and truth, to be present and witness to the testimony, and seats himself as he calls the case to begin. He points to the barrister on your side, who is seated, or actually standing here in this courtroom. The defendant and the plaintiff stand behind a tall table, which I assume kind of ensures that court proceedings move along promptly, because the various sides get a little tired of standing, and so they move along rather quickly. But they are standing behind their tables, and there are 2 bars at the top of the stairs, one on the plaintiff's side and one on the defendant's side, that you presume are where testimony is given. He points to the barrister on Heldar's side and says, "Barrister, you may begin." And the barrister nods to him, turns to the court, and briefly gives a summary of what he hopes to prove, that one Soluun Xibrindas, and he points to him on the other side, has been charged with 3 murders and 1 attempted murder in the dock ward, and gives various details of the murders that have occurred, dates and times and locations and so forth, gives the underlying foundation of what the charges are in the case. He then immediately calls a young woman seated behind your front row up to the witness stand. She comes up and gives her name. I won't bother to give her a name at this point, but she identifies herself as the widow of one of the elves that was killed in the dock ward. He then takes testimony from her about who her husband was and how she's been left almost penniless, etc., etc., and the details of his sad death and so forth that has occurred about a week prior, and gets the testimony for that. Following her testimony, he calls forward the tavern owner at the Mule Skull Tavern, which was the one that you were involved with. And he proceeds to have the tavern owner give a rather detailed explanation, which states that he, on the night in question, he saw Nakri. He identifies her, points at her in the bar, speaking with Heldar, and there was not much going on in the bar at that time. He refers to his nervousness regarding the fact there had been murders in the quadrant for some time, for a week or a week and a half, and the tensions were running rather high, and that Nakri then, after speaking with Heldar, left the bar with him, and sometime later Heldar came running back in, guards were summoned, and there was a commotion outside his bar in the alley. That's about all he knew that was going on. He then had run out of the tavern and saw the guards involved, your group involved, Soluun involved. He identifies everybody as having been in the group, that something had occurred, but he states that he did not see any crimes occur. So at this point, the barrister from the other side gets up and questions him, very detailed on these matters, again stressing that the tavern owner did not see any crimes, that he only saw Nakri depart with Heldar and nothing else, and is not able to get any further details out of him regarding that. He just says, no, I heard a commotion, and that's all that it was. I will open it to you guys of any questions you would want me to have put into the barrister's mouth. If you want to, I will allow you guys to give me questions that you would wish your barrister would ask.
For the barrister, when Heldar came in, did he make any assumption that if Nakri was involved in the scheme, or if he was there to protect her, just to get that wording out?
The barrister would ask this, and the tavern owner would say, I don't know nothing about that. All I know is Heldar came rushing in and said there'd been an attack in the alley. That's all I know. And he said, call the guards, and we did. So that's the only reference that you were able to get out of that.
Okay.
I would see if the it's the barkeep that's being questioned, the barrister.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep names straight while having a stuffy nose. I would have him ask if the barkeep had seen the alleged individual in his tavern before Nakri had left. Like, did he manage to see this guy leave, or still be there post her leaving? Kind of
in
deal.
his follow-up questioning, your barrister asks this question, and the answer is no, sir, didn't see Mr. Soluun in there that night, though I did see him in there a couple of nights prior.
I would also have the barrister ask if what was hurt, if he heard any loud noises beforehand.
Or could he describe the noise that happened?
Exactly.
The only noise I heard, sir, was some kind of loud slamming sound against the building. Seems like something hit the building next to mine. And the Soluun's barrister would say, "Do you know for a fact that something hit that building?" "Well, no, sir, but there was a loud noise and there's a big hole in the wall now."
Wait, did it hit the wall or the ground?
Yeah, it missed you and hit the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it hit the wall. Okay, I thought it hit the ground. That's why I was like, wait, which was the detail that was there?
In my defense, I will say, before I did this, I carefully reviewed the video.
Oh, okay. I believe you. I'm just like, I don't
Done
remember.
that so many times for the Saturday game.
Don't you try your wily tricks, Lynn. We've got you on video.
And
Get out of here.
your barrister says, "Thank you. There will be no more questions," and the tavern owner steps back to his seat. At that point, your barrister calls Cashin to the stand.
All right, so Cashin does as he is told, but Cashin puts on a slight show of looking a little, still looking hurt from his wounds.
Like he's had a bit of a limp.
More, he's just having. It looks like he's having chest pains.
I'm walking slow. I was stabbed.
Well, cut.
Slash
You know what I mean?
twice across the chest.
Blooded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
As he moves, the shepherd actually takes over his spot.
Greedy. All right, your barrister moves over in front of you and he says, "Would you, for your court, identify your name and place of residence?"
I am Cashin Atel Kassir. I am a Waterdeep, and I currently reside in the Troll Skull Manor.
Thank you, sir. So you are a native of the city, is that correct?
Yes.
Would you please inform the court the events which occurred on the night in question?
Well, as the night went on, me and my friends were in the dock wards looking for possible workers for our inn. During our peruse through the various inns, we heard about these murders, but thought nothing of it, though we did ask questions, until we came to, what was the name of the inn again?
Mule Skull.
The Mule Skull Inn, where my friend Nokri met Heldar.
I'd go with associate, but yeah.
As she was busy talking with him, I decided to go out and get a breath of fresh air. And told her that I would meet up with her in the alleyway. When the time came when she was coming to us, I heard a commotion, and not soon after, a cloaked individual came out of the alleyway and attacked her and Heldar, using a strange weapon that let out a loud thunder crack. This weapon's projectile went wide and hit the building next to the tavern, and this man fled when his attack failed.
The barrister holds up his hand at this point, and he goes over to a box that is beside his table and pulls out a weapon that looks like this, and asks you if this is the weapon that you saw confiscated from Mr. Xibrindas.
Since Cashin Well, Cashin points out that since for him the nighttime would be of no deterrent to his sight, he does say that is the weapon in question.
And you are quite certain that this weapon was that Mr. Soluun discharged a weapon at Mr. Heldar?
Yes, that is true, Your Honor.
Please continue.
Well, after the failed attempt, the cloaked individual fled, and that is when I came out of the alleyway to see him fleeing. I immediately attempted to deter him, but in his rush to escape my grasp, his cloak fell out, and his cloak came loose, and it revealed. And I saw a good look at the individual.
And can you identify that individual for us?
Yes, I can, Your Honor. And he immediately points to Soluun.
No, Ellie, you missed it. You were supposed to be all dramatic and say it was that man.
Oh my.
Oh,
And by
God.
the way, I just realized, and before we go on, I skipped something which I meant to have included when the tavern owner was interviewed. One of the questions that the barrister intended to ask him was the opposite barrister, the other barrister, wanted to ask him when, after he was identified, Soluun as having been in the tavern 2 days prior, he said, did Soluun leave any kind of flyer or circular in your establishment at that time? And he would have said yes. Go on.
All right, well, okay, so after seeing who the individual was, I continued my efforts, and as I was chasing after him, he attacked me with his scimitar. And I received 2 slashing cuts, and I immediately took to the ground due to how grievous these injuries were.
Did you require medical assistance for your injuries?
Yes, I did.
Very well. Is there anything else you wish to add? Now, I stress your weapon was what? I need to stress your weapon was what? What is
The weapon.
What weapon do you carry?
I carry a rapier, sir.
Thank you very much. Your witness, and he motions to Soluun's barrister, and Soluun's barrister comes over in front of you and says, how can you be certain that it was this weapon, and he points to the evidence weapon, that made the loud sound?
As we were traveling around the inns, we heard of these rumors of a murderer. When one of the inns I went to in look for workers had an innkeeper that described a weapon or described a noise similar to what this weapon created. And when Soluun here was fleeing, he was wielding this weapon in a threatening manner.
I repeat my question, however, Mr. Cashin, I believe it was. Did you actually see the weapon fired?
Did I actually see the weapon being fired?
I don't think you did. You were hidden behind a corner.
Oh no.
It's gonna have to be either Relly or Epi.
No.
Yeah.
No, sir, I did not.
I thank you very much. I am done. He looks at the other barrister and steps back. And the other barrister stands up and he says, from what direction did you hear the noise come?
Trying to remember where.
Been above you from the roof, because Soluun was actually on the roof.
It was above the roof in which I was staying at.
Was there any additional noise as the projectile, as described, hit the wall near one of the other witnesses? Did you hear any further noise?
Yes, I heard the sound of an individual climbing down the walls and landing onto the ground.
But did you hear the noise of the projectile striking the building?
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much. And he steps down. You are excused, unless anybody has any other questions they want your lawyer to ask. All right, you are excused.
Get out of my seat.
Take a look at what I typed in Discord chat.
He then calls Nokri to the stand.
Yep. Just walk up, keep the head high type deal, keep that proud, noble atmosphere going, and have a seat politely and nod, signaling that she's ready.
You're actually standing, but only the people.
Oh, I thought it was like a seat.
Everybody but the judges and the people out in the audience stands. And again, he says, would you identify your full name, place of residence, and your tenure in Waterdeep, please?
I am Nakaris Nakari. Of currently residence in the Troskal Manor. Time of residency with him, I would say maybe about 2 or so months.
Understand. And for the record, and he smiles up at the nobility that's the magistrate on the dais, he says, do you have any record of your lineage and your placement regarding your, shall we say, standing in Waterdeep?
My standing in Waterdeep is one that I am building by reputation. I try not to rest on my laurels of my homeland, but I do, in fact, and she will pull up her sleeve from the shirt that she's wearing and unbuckle her bracer, which actually has her proof of nobility hidden within it. I do actually have such paperwork. I know there's usually a lot of questions when a new noble comes into town.
So, please the court, you are of the noble strain, and you testify that you were attacked by the individual seated here before we begin. Is that correct?
Yes. To keep it simple, yes.
And so he looks up at the court and he says, as stated, one of the charges to be added to the list of charges is that a noble registered within our city was attacked that night. Thank you, Miss Nakaris. Would you please now tell the court your story of what occurred that night?
I and my fellows have been working towards restoring the inn, and doing so, we need to find workers, people who can help us bring supplies in, things to get shipped out if needed. So we went looking for such workers and came upon this rumor of those who are being murdered in the streets. Fortunately, that's rather unfortunate, but such is the way things are. As we came across here, I came across the individual across from me. She motions to, and I can't remember the name, so forgive me.
Heldar.
Thank you. Motion to Heldar, and I came across him. He seemed like the sort that could find to actually service our needs. So I approached him, talked to him, and had him walk out with me. Upon walking out to meet with the rest of my fellows who awaited me to continue this conversation, there was a loud crack, and like any person in my standing, and unfortunately the business that I take care of, I shielded the individual with my body, given that he fit also the description of those who have been fortunately slain. So when the projectile hit the wall, or whatever it was, it left a nasty mark. I turned and saw Cassian run after him. And that's all I can say that from my vantage point.
What did you do following this attack?
Well, I told Haldard to run back to the inn and call for the guard to make sure he stayed safe. I'd hate to try and employ someone who ended up dead on my watch. That's completely unsavory. And, well, I took after Cassian. Wasn't going to let another one of my co-workers get killed on the job.
I thank you very much. You may cross-examine. And he steps away, and the other barrister comes up in front of you, and he says, in point of fact, did you not warn Mr. Heldar prior to leaving the tavern that you were concerned with his safety and you wished to accompany him to prevent any injury to him?
Indeed, I did. I have no reason to lie about it. He fit, as I stated, he fit the description of one who would be attacked. Why wouldn't I want to protect someone who would be under my employ?
I am curious, Miss Nakaris. Why would you wish a sailor to be in your employ at the tavern?
It's easier to transport things back and forth between my homeland and here.
So you specifically singled out Mr. Heldar, a half-elf and a sailor, who most curiously fit the description of the other murders in the dock ward, specifically for employment in your tavern.
Employment with the tavern, not so much in it. I mean, come now. I can't believe this is actually going to be a line of questioning.
And Soluun's lawyer immediately looks up at the magistrate and says, "Objection. Please inform the witness that she is to answer my questions." The magistrate just raps his staff a couple of times, indicating that he has so ruled. And
My apologies.
And the barrister says, "No further questions. Thank you very much." And he motions to Heldar's lawyer, and at that point I will open it to our players. What questions would you want him to ask her?
Did you know for a fact that the weapon here in the evidence box was used by Soluun?
He would ask you, did you see this weapon on display being used by Soluun?
OOC, I'm trying to remember if I actually did or not. If I had,
you and I were the only people in direct line of sight when he jumped up and fired.
But that would have to, OOC Lee again, would have to be a call on the player a bit, because you were speaking with Heldar, and
I was also keeping a lookout.
Yeah, it was the only person who actually saw a form on the roof was Cassian.
To see them fire it, I would have to say, unfortunately, I did not. But, again, what I do with my business and upbringing, training, etc., I could detect that it came from the direction of where Cassian had seen the individual being on the roof.
So you heard it from above and away from you on the roofs, not next to you, like something very close to you.
No, this was something, how this
a
went
ranged
down.
Weapon.
It was a ranged device.
Thank you.
Had it been up close, that would have been a lot more deadly.
Thank you very much. Do you have any further? I will open it for any further statement that you wish to make regarding the evidence. And he kind of stresses the evidence to make sure that you don't get into the realm of opinion or something. Any further evidence that you wish to state? This would be Nokri's ask.
I mean, obviously, I know what it is.
Yeah, but that's your. This is.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. No, I'm just sorry. I'm trying to formulate my thoughts before I put it into words. So, so I don't want to sound like I'm like, meh. But backstory. Yeah, I don't.
Well, just call it here. You don't have enough to go on, so let's just call it there.
I mean, I could give her like her best assumption based off of the sound, because I would have her call it back to her time dealing with the fact that she helped set up her navy. It kind of sounded like a cannon.
Yeah, but I can
guarantee that's why I'm kind of like, that's why I'm like, it's getting too speculatory.
Yeah, that'd be too far. So at that point, he'll nod and release you from the witness stand, and he will call Relian to the stand.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Oh no!
Oh boy! Wish me luck.
I immediately just start lowering my head.
Yeah, Cashin just puts his hood on.
The barrister says, Mr. Relian, would you please state your full name, place of residence, and tenure in Waterdeep for us?
Well, might I say it's a pleasure to be here, and my name would happen to be Relion Rescuro of the Silvery Moon Rescuros. Pleasure. I'm currently residing at the Troll Skull Tavern, and we're building it up. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. But as for my residency in the city as a time frame, oh my, it's been well over a year and a half now.
I see. Do you have any connections to the nobility that should be noted for the court?
Oh, no. No connections to the nobility. I'm simply a simple street sorcerer, you might say. I try to help where I can, and that's that.
I'm giving you an opening for the Mistra thing.
Oh, thank you. Well, not nobility as such, but I do, however, I am a proud member of the Temple of Mistra, in good standing, I might add, and I am an acolyte and registered priest in her name.
I see. So you are a member of the clerical staff of the Temple of Mistra. That is correct?
That's one way to put it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
He raises his hand towards Magister Zastro and says, Magister, if it please the court, would you please record that the attack was taken on the person of a cleric within the bounds of the city of Waterdeep? And then he says, Mr. Relian, would you please give the court your sequence of events as you saw them that night?
Well, it's much like my fellows were saying, much like they were saying indeed. We were checking the docks for workers here and there, servers, tavern wenches, a few sailors to transport some items, as Nokri said, from her homeland to ours. And we happened to mosey along the Mule Skull Tavern, and Mule Skull, horrible name, by the way. Troll Skull, much more impressive. But we happened to mosey by that tavern, and we found the defendant, the person in question, poor fellow, and he seemed to be in a spot of bother, a bit of bad luck, a pinch. And my good friend Nokri,
I think you
Plaintiff.
meant
Plaintiff, I'm sorry. Plaintiff. But my good friend Nokri, generous as she is, she offered him a spot of work to help him get out of his troubles, and she escorted him outside to speak with the rest of us as to possible employment. And as we were moseying down out of sight, because we had heard the horrible rumors of attacks, and we certainly didn't want any of that bad business on our hands. And as soon as we had secluded ourselves, what should happen? But we were attacked. Now, I'd call that a bit of bad luck, wouldn't you?
Indeed, indeed. How can you relate the actual attack and how it occurred?
Well, we were a bit spread out because she had been in the tavern for a while. We were moseying around, and as she was coming down with our possible new employee, we suddenly saw and heard just someone jump down from the rooftops, as it were, quite agile, almost elven agility, if you might forgive me for saying so. And
Objection, Your Honor. That is supposition on the part of the witness. And the magister will rap his staff 2 times.
yeah, forgive me. I have a few elven family members. It's just I know these things when I see them, but I'll retract it if you wish. And but anyway, as soon as he landed down, the attacker, attacked our good friend and prospective employee there, and we defended him to the best of our capabilities.
I see. And regarding the attack itself, what did you see or hear regarding the initial attack?
Well, I came around as quick as I could, but before that, I heard this horrible banging noise. It almost sounded like the mad love child of a bout of thunder and a busted drum, and after that, I heard the cracking of stone and surprised yelps from some of my compatriots, and after that, I made my way over to them as soon as I could, and I saw the defendant there pointing a strange instrument at them, and it seemed to be smoking somewhat.
I see. Thank you very much. Do you have any further to add before I hand you over for cross-referencing?
Tell them about how you held Cashin in your arms.
I have a few things to add.
No,
but-
that nothing.
But one thing I will ask is the damage that the gun did to the wall. Would that have been easily seen by all of us, and would I be able to remember it?
The damage to the wall will be very visible, was that night, and will actually be testified to by the guards. So you can use that for anything you want.
Okay. Well, during the battle, a bit of a scuffle it was, I noticed the damage done to the Muleskull Tavern's wall, and the Muleskull Tavern, I'm sorry, the Muleskull Tavern's wall.
Actually, it was the building next door, but...
Oh, okay. The building next to the Muleskull Tavern, and it was the darndest thing. I've never seen something that small do that much damage. It embedded itself almost cleanly into the stone with only a few cracks around it, and it was the force it must have propelled itself with was quite impressive and dangerous, if I do say so myself. And I would like to say that my good friend Cassian, Cece, I call him Cece, he loves it, but my good friend Cece over there, he was gravely wounded, and I had to stabilize him, and with my own 2 hands, I had to stem the flow of blood from his body. So, my good sirs, my good men of honor, nobility, and judges, even if by some miracle you find him innocent of the crimes he's clearly guilty of beforehand, it cannot be argued that he attacked us and almost killed one of our good friends.
Thank you. And he motions for the cross-questioning by the other lawyer, and he steps up and he says, "You say you saw this weapon smoking. I understand from previous witnesses that he fired it from a rooftop. How did you see it smoke from that distance?"
I saw it was still in his hand, just because he hadn't put it away from what I could see.
And you're going to tell the court that it was smoking all of this time?
It seemed to be, from my eyes, and I've got quite the peepers on me, if you couldn't tell. He motions to his glowing, multicolored eyes.
Oh, that'll help.
Sorry, I'll mute. I just realized it's from my end.
So the barrister said, so you saw it smoking, and it was still smoking sometime later. How long would you say that term of time was between when it was supposedly fired on the rooftop and when you saw it smoking?
Well, considering each turn is only about 6 seconds, I'm using some OOC knowledge. Each turn is only about 6 seconds, and he went fairly early in the turn order. I would say about about 15 to 20. Yeah, about 15 to 20 seconds, I'd say. Not as long a time as you think.
Ah, that's amazing. So you're saying that all of this occurred in a span of less than a minute?
Relian would actually lean forward a bit and said, "Sir, have you ever been in a battle? Have you ever seen how quickly things fly and how quickly attacks can come at you? I'm asking you, have you ever been in a battle?"
I am questioning you. I am just wondering how it is. Perhaps it occurred in the span of time, you say, but it does bring up a question, I must say. Thank you, your witness. And he steps back to the thing, and is there anything further that the barrister asks him that you guys want to input?
The barrister would ask, what kind of, did you see the weapon in question that Mr. Soluun here attacked your associate Cashin with?
The barrister would phrase it as, I will have you repeat, Mr. Relian, you actually saw this weapon, emotions to the device, in the hands of Mr. Soluun. Is that correct?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. In fact, I saw him fiddling with the device as he was attempting to flee, possibly trying to prime it again for another attack, much like one would re-knock an arrow, I would say.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any further questions you want him to have in his mouth?
What type of weapons did he use against Cat?
Oh, how did he? Okay. And I will need to ask you, Mr. Relian, what weapons did the defendant use on Mr. Cashin, your associate?
Curved swords, scimitars they were. Scimitars they be.
Just a scimitar.
Scimitars they are. A scimitar it was. A scimitar. I thought it was two because it's multi-attack, but you can never tell with that damn thing.
It actually.
But.
It actually is two. That's why he had multi-attack, was he could use dual weapons.
Thank you, Ellie. Anyway, but yes, scimitars they were. Scimitars they is, I would say. Yes. Nasty looking things they were, too. They cut into my friend deep. He screamed like a girl.
And Cashin just has this indignant look on him.
This is the point where you yell objection.
Objection,
I didn't.
Your Honor.
I am not a girl.
Okay, so he says, I have no further questions. You are excused, Mr. Relian.
Thank you very kindly.
And he will call to the stand after kind of rustling his papers just a little bit and looking a little uncomfortable. He will call to the stand Epiphany.
Oh, no.
Yep. Cashin's just gonna turn his head now.
Yeah, as
Where's
the
stand specifically? Do I have to move my icon, or do I just... Okay.
Right there. Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm like, oh.
All right. So, this massive tarp-covered thing starts clambering up to this full, 7'3" height, and makes their way to the bar.
The lawyer kind of clears his throat and steps in front of Epiphany and says, Sir, would you give your full name, place of residence, and tenure in Waterdeep for the court, please?
Epiphany looks at Relian just really quickly and says, I was designated 2.718-3.141-1.618N-1. However, your society's identifying documents have it abbreviated to NPI-Phi-Ni, or Epiphany. Is Epiphany sufficient for the purposes of this proceeding?
The barrister will look up at the magister, and the magister is, his jaw is just, as you're doing this, it's just slowly...
Even more uncomfortable.
And
I unfortunately have no other identifying information about myself in terms of name nor family relation. Will Epiphany be sufficient?
the main magister looks at the other four judges, and they all just kind of blink at him and kind of shrug, and finally he says, that will be sufficient, yes.
Very well. We do not have recollection of existing in any other city but Waterdeep.
So you consider yourself a native of Waterdeep, is that correct, Mr. Epiphany?
Just Epiphany. But by your standards, yes, we would be considered a native.
Thank you very much. Would you please tell the court your take on the events in question of the night of the attack?
Yes. I accompanied my associates. Hold on, just read something. I accompanied my associates, Lady Nokaris and Relian and Cassian, to the location in question. It was the... I'm sorry, don't remember the name of the...
Mule Skull.
Muskull. To the Mule Skull Tavern. We had been aware of danger in the area, and so, through rumors, we had thought that we would keep an eye out for certain risky elements. As far as the selection of who would be hired, we left that to Lady Nokaris. I, however, was filtering through detritus in the alley as I was accompanying Relian, who was further down the alley investigating something else. I had been looking down the alley opposite direction from where Lady Nokaris was accompanying Heldar on the corner. It was at that moment that a shadow rose up from some position into the sky, and there was a flash of light and a sudden impact above my head about 15 inches. I flung detritus at the shadow as it landed and pursued. I was within 10 feet of the defendant consistently for the next 35 seconds, spanning the length of the open area north of where the guards had come to apprehend the defendant. I saw the device in the hands of the defendant, and there was a struggle with it. Then upon appearing the weapon appeared to be incapacitated, the defendant had switched to two long, curved weapons, which were then used upon Cassian. I pursued, quickly followed by Lady Nokaris, and we had managed to restrain the defendant, remove the weapons from him. I had loaded a crossbow and aimed it at his head, but upon the guard's arrival, I removed the implement aiming at him.
I'm sorry, real quick, I have to ask, how is the party reacting to this?
Yeah, it's a completely different way of presenting himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
First person, deeper voice, not wispy at all, and he is
Yeah.
perfectly straight
I
up.
thought the deeper
I'm-
voice was because you were sick.
And I was sitting here blinking at the Mr. Spock rendition of exactly what occurred. It was exactly 2 meters in this direction and exactly 35 seconds of that.
I would like to point out, though, that Relian is just sitting in the galley, just nodding along, apparently very pleased. This isn't anything new to him. He's seen this before.
I'm going to say, actually, he has not.
Oh, really?
He has never seen himself. He has never seen Epiphany refer to himself in first person or speak in this manner. Like the whole scientific thing occasionally, but in this specific way altogether, no.
In that case, Relian's just going to clap his hooded cheeks and say, "He's growing up."
Cashin is just completely
Nakri
flabbergasted.
Nakri is pretty much just tickled pink. She's like, "This is a whole new side to this monster. I love it."
Oh yeah, and he was also using your proper names, not.
Yeah, no, she's just like, "This is amazing. He's more useful than I thought."
Does she say that out loud?
No, she's just like, the look on her face is basically what I just said.
The reptilian facsimile, at least.
Yeah.
And then upon the arrival of the guards, we surrendered. We retreat. We pulled back and allowed the guards to perform their duties admirably.
And I wish to ask you, Mr. Epiphany, you actually saw this weapon, and he points to the pistol, in the hands of the defendant.
There was not a moment during the incident where I did not see it in his possession until it had been put away.
You heard the discharge of the weapon, or what you presume to be the discharge of the weapon, occurring from the rooftop?
As the impact upon the wall of the building next to the Mule Skull Tavern was directly above my head, yes, I had direct line of sight of it.
So you actually saw the weapon fire?
Yes, it was very bright.
I thank you very much. And he kind of looks over at the other barrister and gives a smirk.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And he says, "Your witness," and steps back. And the other barrister comes forward, kind of stroking his chin, and he goes, "Mr. Epiphany, you seem to be a scientist. What is your occupation?"
We have no occupation.
How do you come by all these scientific terms that you are claiming?
It was inherited.
So you have not studied under any master?
In specific direct terms, in the context you are referring to as far as professional education, no.
I see. So it was in your judgment that these measurements occurred. Is that correct?
I am willing to go to the location and demonstrate it.
Well, perhaps that will be necessary. We shall see. And you say that you actually saw the weapon discharge. Exactly what did it look like?
Sorry?
You say you actually saw the weapon discharge. What did it look like?
Upon discharging, there was a single bright flash of light followed by an almost immediate shockwave sound. And then almost in the same instant, there was an impact concussive force directly above my head.
Was Miss Nakara standing beside the defendant at the time that you heard the impact on the wall?
Plaintiff.
I was not looking directly at her, but I was aware of her nearby and directly in front of Haldar.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Your Honor. Do the players wish any cross questioning by your barrister?
I would just say, to corroborate and back up Relian's claim, that until the gun was put away and taken from him by the guards, it was actually not out of his sight.
The barrister would say, "I will repeat the questioning that led to your answer, that you saw this weapon, this device in his hands at all times until it was removed from him by the guards."
Yes, it was approximately 12 seconds after the defendant had landed, there was fumbling with it as if some sort of mechanism had misfired in some way, and then it was put away and replaced with the 2 curved blades.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Your Honor, unless you guys have any.
Not really.
I mean, I know what questions I want to this.
Yes, but not relevant. Yes, but not relevant to the situation.
Exactly.
All of my questions are basically if they put Soluun on the stand. I've got some good ones in the back of my head, just ready to go.
All right, very good. Unless you guys have anything further you wish your lawyer to do, he will rest his primary case at this time. You have anything else you want him to ask or question?
Has the weapon been demonstrated in court?
Yes, he held it up. He took it out of a box, held it up in court, and it's out in evidence in the court.
No, I mean,
Oh no,
has it
fired.
been fired in court?
No, it has not been fired in court. But I don't think they would allow it to be either.
You'd think the guards would test it out, and they
If they don't know how to use it, why would they mess with it?
Right.
Exactly.
This is a weapon that's not really well known in Waterdeep, therefore none of them would know how to operate it.
I kind of want to volunteer.
All right, so he rests his case at that time, his primary case at that time, and says, I turn the case over to my fellow barrister. And the barrister steps forward, and the first one he calls is an individual that is seated behind your group, and he calls him to the stand and asks his name. He gives a very ordinary kind of name, and he says, what is your place of residence? And he says it's Waterdeep. He's been there for some time. He asks him what his occupation is, and he is the tavern keeper at one of the previous taverns that you visited that night when you were questioning around the taverns. He proceeds then to follow a line of questioning. I'm going to just summarize so we don't take a lot of time. A line of questioning whether or not he saw the group of you come in. He testifies that only a couple of you came in, but that you were asking questions about the murder in the dock district. And he asks him if he heard you interviewing anyone for employment, and the answer is no. What do you wish your lawyer to cross-examine on?
I would have him ask that. I would have our lawyer reiterate that we were very straightforward, that we were asking questions about the murder because we were trying to steer clear away from it. That in itself isn't actually a piece of evidence.
That would, yeah, like it was well known that the murders were occurring. So
yeah, it's gossip.
It could have just been that we were learning. Is it possible that they were just learning because they were looking to hire people in the area and they were concerned?
All right, he will state that. He says, were any other people in the inn other than the plaintiffs, did any other people ever discuss the murders in the dock district? And he responds, oh yes, that was a subject of conversation in the taverns in the area. And he says, so it is nothing unusual that my clients might have been concerned about their safety in the dock ward. Is that correct? Oh, quite. Everyone was concerned, even myself, and I'm not elf.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just going to also interject, considering that we were also walking around with a half-elf.
Yeah,
at the time.
We have a half-elf. Well, at least one confirmed half-elf.
Yeah,
Cashin.
because of Cashin, why would we go to some place where there has been an attack and potentially could have had another victim type deal?
I'm waiting for the day when Epiphany says, oh, I'm half elf too. That's my little finger.
Oh, God.
Gross.
That would be 146th elf.
Back in the gallery, like Relian just gives Epi a hug and says, "I'm very proud of you. You did good."
Please do not.
All right. So the barrister steps back to his place. No further questions, and the other tavern owner is excused. He actually leaves the bar or leaves the legal bar,
The stand.
the whole courtroom at that time, and just goes on back to his work. He asked to be excused, and he is. All right.
Cashin will actually look at the person as he's leaving. What do I see? Perception.
He is a human, and he looks very ordinary, and he does look like the barkeep / tavern owner in whatever it was, Mermaid something or other that you visited.
Sorry, go on.
Does he look like he's concerned or something, or like he's in a rush?
No, he very politely asked if he could return to his work because there was no one competent that was handling the bar while he's gone, and they excused him with the condition that if he was needed, he could be recalled.
All right.
Quick question for you guys. Or rather, I'm trying to figure out how to word it. Sorry. Would any of us recognize this as somebody that we spoke to? Because didn't we talk to several?
I said you would recognize him as the barkeep / tavern owner. It's the Mermaid something or the Mermaid's Kiss or whatever.
Okay, I guess I was just trying to figure out which group went in to talk to him. I guess that's what I was just trying to figure out.
And I don't specifically recall. It was only a few of you went into most of the bars.
Yeah, we divided and conquered.
That could actually play in our favor, because if two different tavern owners sees two different groups, then we can just say, well, we split up and we both heard the rumor at the same time. That doesn't prove anything.
Exactly.
Possibly.
At that point, the defense barrister, calls an individual who has very flashy robes on. Although the robes are a bit darker, think Liberace in his performance robes with all the sparkles and doodads that was on it. And he flares his robe around him as he stands up, and he calls to the stand, Mr. Thundros.
Which one was Thundros?
I don't think we met him.
Yeah, this sounds like a new person. Yep, it's the drow.
No, he is a drow, but that is not. It's a different drow than you've met before.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he says he stands in front of him and he says, "Mr. Thundros, is that your correct name?" And the man says, "No, actually. My name is Feldor the Magnificent. That is my legal name, but I go by simply Thundros these days. Are you a resident of Waterdeep?" "No, sir. I am a resident of the traveling Maiden's Fair that has recently come to the city for the high harvest tide. My residence is aboard the ships."
Can I insight that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Insight. That'd be a 12. Probably not good enough.
It does seem like he is at this point telling pretty much the truth. He's doing this. It doesn't seem like he's straining or doing anything that he has to try to deceive or do any deception on. He's just talking about where he is, and the barrister has him describe a little bit about this traveling circus sort of thing, traveling Renaissance fair / circus and what it does, and he describes in detail how the ships travel up and down the coast to the various cities and their various festivals that occur, and that they had only recently, just a day or so ago, few days ago, had arrived in Waterdeep and were preparing to give their performances for High Harvest Tide. And the man then asks him, who is his employer. He identifies Zastros Zord, Lord Zord, as his employer, as the head of the traveling fair. And then the barrister asks him what his job is with the fair. And he says he is a performer, that he has a display that is called Thundros the Astounding, and that he fires a thunder weapon and causes things to happen across the ring from him with apparently no spells whatsoever. And he goes into great detail, very magnificent detail in showman's terms, of how he uses this weapon, and the crowd oohs and ahs as he does this. And he says, I am giving away trade secrets, obviously, because to the audience it appears that nothing is being used, yet with a mere wave of this device, things are destroyed. And he says, what types of things? Why, melons and various boards and things are blown apart across the ring. He then asks him if the device in evidence in the court is the actual weapon that belongs to Thundros the Magnificent, and he says, yes, it is his weapon. And he said, how did the weapon come to be in the possession of my defendant, Mr. Soluun? The man says that the weapon had malfunctioned, was not firing properly, and he had had Soluun take it 2 days prior to the incident in question, had taken it to a smith to have it looked at to see if he could figure out what part of the mechanisms inside were not operating properly. And that Mr. Soluun was supposed to be Mr. Xibrindas was supposed to be returning the weapon to him on the day of the start of the show, which is at the beginning of High Harvest Tide. So the barrister says, so the weapon was not in your possession, it was in Mr. Soluun's possession, and he says that yes, it was. And at that point, that barrister steps back for cross-examination by your barrister. What questions do you wish your barrister to ask?
Real quick, just to get this out here, he mentioned melons and boards of wood. My question would be, that's very interesting. Those are tough objects, normally speaking. Do you think, hypothetically, this weapon could pierce flesh and bone?
The barrister would try to avoid hypotheticals to a certain extent. He said he would go, he would say, how would you compare the thickness of a melon to that of the skull of a sentient being? The man would answer, well, I would assume, and there's no complaint on the part of the other one. He says, I would only assume that a skull would be more substantial than a melon. However, not too much more substantial than the boards that I use. It would probably do some damage to a skull.
Yeah.
Any other questions that you wish to have your barrister ask?
Can he describe? So can he ask him again how to describe the weapon and what it does when used? Like what sounds it makes, what it looks like, what it actually does when it's fired.
Are there any loud noises or bright lights?
He'll ask those too in conjunction with it. He will actually pick the weapon up and hand it to Mr. Thundros and say, the weapon, I will verify to the court, is currently unloaded. There is nothing inside that could be thrown forth from this device. Mr. Thundros, would you please demonstrate to the court how this device is used? And it's very much simpler than what we would think of as a pistol or even early flintlocks. It's a very, very primitive flintlock sort of device, and he will describe how he puts a leaded projectile into the item, and that he then lights using a firebolt kind of spell. He then lights a wick, which causes powder that explosive powder, cannon powder that he has used to explode inside it and sends the projectile forth, and he will demonstrate how he opens up the gun, places the projectile in, and where the powder and wick are deposited for the thing. Is that sufficient for what you were needing?
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
I've got one I was trying to get at before, but I was trying to word it. It's kind of a two-parter. One, is he absolutely certain that he's the only one trained in using this device? Can he say it with utmost certainty that he's the only person that knows how to operate this device in the circus? And then the other question is, can he provide one of the damaged boards?
He will respond
to show the kind of damage it does.
He will respond, was not requested for that information. However, obviously, if the court wish, I could demonstrate it. I usually dispose of my boards following a show and set them up. And obviously, since we have not begun our show here in Waterdeep yet, I have not discharged this weapon yet in Waterdeep. So I don't have any boards in my possession, but I could demonstrate it if the court wishes to fire the weapon. That's the only thing I would be able to answer you. As far as my using it, this is my weapon. I was trained in the use of it by some dwarven kind that I came across. And I have personally trained no one in its use outside of myself.
But he can't say with certainty that he is the only one that knows how to use it.
How complicated? Okay, well,
it's
kind of a corollary to that would be like, how complex is the operation now that it's been explained?
Yeah, and that's kind of my point in it. It is not a terribly complex weapon. Pry this open, put this in, put powder in, put a wick out and below it. Yeah,
it's not even.
Could somebody reasonably observe the process and make a go at it, and then have then have it jam afterwards?
The barrister will say, is it within the realm of possibility that another untrained person could have construed how to fire this weapon? And the defense barrister will stand up and object on the ground of supposition. And the two of them get into a bit of an argument over whether it's relative or not. And finally, your barrister rewords it and says, how long did it take you, sir, to learn how to operate this device? And the Thundros responds, less than an hour.
So basically, anybody could use this weapon.
I mean, this thing is simple as hell. It's not even a proper pistol. It's a hand cannon with a handle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my god! Actually, oh fuck. Sorry, it's stupid, but I kind of don't want him to use it. I kind of want to volunteer to be the one to shoot the gun.
Yeah, like hand shoots up.
Yeah, like how quick, like when we do the if the court pleases to do the demonstration, could it instead be not him doing it, but like maybe basically the barrister puts in, should the court acquiesce and decide, we need a demonstration of this, could it be somebody that has never seen it before attempted?
He will state this to the court, that he would like to see the weapon discharged by a person completely new to its operation, to demonstrate how simple it is for a person to learn it. And the magister will simply say, at this point, he will take it under consideration. This, if it is proved that this weapon is as dangerous as you say it is, I will resist using it in court. Your barrister will say, we will see if we cannot have it fired under conditions that will pose as little damage or danger to the court as possible, but please take it under consideration. And he will step back and say, no further witnesses, no further questions. And the barrister then says, you are excused, and Thundros steps down, and he calls up a man who is sitting in one of the back rows, who comes to the stand, identifies himself as Delrin, who is a blacksmith. And he is questioned about whether or not he repaired the weapon, who brought it to him, who was Soluun, what he did to repair the weapon, and he said that it had been carbonized from the black powder that had been in it, and that he had disassembled it, cleaned it thoroughly, and put it back together again, and had returned it to Soluun's possession and had charged him the repair costs for it. Do you wish your barrister to cross-examine?
Sorry, trying to think of something.
I would. Well, I wanted this question to be towards Thundros, but my question would.
Mink, who is just sitting there because he isn't directly involved, you can put you and Gore, Brett and Mike can put in their 2 cents if they want the barrister to ask something. You don't have to be quiet.
I did at the start. I haven't thought of anything relevant.
I haven't said a single word since the beginning. The only question I would have the barrister ask is if he is absolutely certain this is the same, like have the barrister hand the smith the weapon and confirm without a doubt that this is the same one he worked on.
He would do so, and the smith says, I have never seen anything like this before. This is clearly the same device that I worked on. This is one of a kind, highly unique, sir. This has to be the same weapon.
Ask him if, knowing what he knows about metalworking, given what the magnificent dude, Thundros, yes, given what Thundros testified about the gun's operation and the smith's knowledge of metalworking, does he believe that the weapon could be operated in such a way?
He says, yes, in my estimation, I found this quite astounding. It is, how do I say, a miniaturization of cannon use, and I have never seen anything so amazing in my life.
How many times has he worked on this weapon, and who brought it to him?
This is my first time ever working on this weapon, sir.
Who brought it to him?
He said Soluun, and he returned it to Soluun.
Question on this. So, trying to do a little bit of math, OOC, and Ms. Ruth, please fill me in if I miss anything that's kind of important for this. How long ago did he bring it to the person to fix it?
3
Like
days. 3 days ago.
And how soon was it given back to Soluun?
It was given back to him the day of your incident.
Okay.
But
it was brought to him 3 days ago and then given back to Soluun that night.
that day on the same night.
And then
For your knowledge, it has not been brought up in court. For your knowledge, 3 days prior was the last murder prior to what occurred that you witnessed.
Okay, so the time frame line.
Oh.
I have questions as well.
Yeah, I have a question about that.
I think we all have questions.
I'll
I
let
think I
Ellie
just figured
ask
something
first.
out. Sorry.
I'll let Ellie ask first since he spoke up first.
Okay. The bailiff will ask if the weapon showed any signs of heavy usage prior.
The bailiff? The bailiff doesn't ask questions. The bailiff keeps orders.
Oh, right, the barrister. Sorry.
Okay. You want him to ask if it showed signs of heavy usage?
Yes, prior to the repairs.
Why, yes, sir. It looks to me like this has been used often, much as Mr. Thundros says he would use it in his show.
Crap, this question would have to go back to Thundros.
Then to the blacksmith, where is his shop located, and are there any other blacksmiths in a competing area for him? Not like, because I think the dock and where we're located, there's obviously a blacksmith near us. That's probably not a competitor towards him, but is there a nearby competitor towards him in his location?
He will say that he is located in the trades district, that he's a well-known and well-respected smith in the trades district, and there are 4 other blacksmith shops in the trades district.
Okay. But this is also the only blacksmith that we see in the courtroom.
Yes, apparently it was the only one that handled the gun.
Okay.
Question. When he brought it in, was it actually broken, or was it just being maintained so it wouldn't break in future?
He would respond, it appeared to me it was not very well maintained. It had been highly corroded, highly built up with the residue of the carbon from the fire powder.
Oh man, I want to bring back the circus dude so bad.
So our barrister would just reiterate that it was given to him 3 days prior to our incident, which just so happened to have a murder take place that night. The night before, and it just so happened Soluun
He will refrain from saying it at this point.
Yeah,
he will reiterate, because he can't put evidence in himself.
He can actually accuse yet. I get that, but
so he will just listen. He will say, he will make a point of the fact that the gun was brought to him and on the exact date that it was brought to him. And in further questioning later on, he's going to ask a question that is tied to this.
Okay.
But he will make a point to get it on the record a second time of the date that the gun was brought to the smith. And then he will say he has no further questioning for the man, and he will step back. And the barrister on the other side shakes his head. He has no further questions. So the smith departs the stand and sits down. The barrister briefly calls a young woman in robes. She drops her hood back when she comes back. She is not a drow. She is an elf, but she is not a drow. And she, again, is in rather velvety, flamboyant-looking robes, very rich-looking robes. And the barrister questions her about her occupation, name. She gives the name. She also is a resident of the traveling fair, and she is one of the trapeze artists in the fair. And she testifies only to the fact that she sees Thundros use the weapon several times a night or several times a day during the various performances that he gives. That's all her testimony is related to. Anything that you want your barrister to ask her?
I would actually ask if I could insight check for her testimony.
All right.
Oh, that's not insight, that's history.
No, it doesn't matter.
I guess it doesn't matter. Yep.
He got a 19 and 21 on both of them on the two things. So I don't happen to have the rolls up on the screen tonight, but yeah, you got 1921 on both of them, the mistake roll and the following one, so it was faded. You insight her, and you can tell that She is primarily telling the truth, but she is perhaps omitting something. It doesn't feel like there's a few places where she kind of looked down just a bit and maybe left something out.
Yeah, she's telling the truth, just not all of the truth.
Quick question.
I have. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Did she give a name? Who is this? The trapeze artist.
I didn't specifically give her a name, but she would have a very flamboyant name of a performer kind of name, you know, Magista, Law, whatever. She's a performer name.
Gotcha. I'm just curious because
I probably should give her a name, but I just got her as entertainer.
Gotcha.
Lucy. I got a question. One part OOC, one part actual question. So on the OOC bit, how long again has the circus been in town for?
For 3 days. When they docked, that was when the latest murder occurred.
Okay.
So the murders were happening prior to the circus's arrival?
But prior to the ship's docking, yes.
So that's their main defense, that Soluun has an alibi.
Yeah. So we can't. Might only have the one under his belt, but
just sit back. Let's see what happens. You might find a
Yeah,
hole happening somewhere.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Does she know what Soluun's act is?
Yes, he's one of the trapeze artists along with me. He is, how could I say, he is absolutely magnificent on the high wire and the trapeze.
Have they produced proof that they've only been in town for 3 days?
Their lord.
No.
Like doc records that they've only been in town for 3 days?
Oh.
No, although it would I would say, just to cut it short, that those records would be proved that the ship's docked just 3 days ago.
Have the bailiff ask
Barrister,
sorry.
Yeah.
Personal question. An OOC question for the people who saw the fight. How high is the roof? Was the roof?
2-story building.
So about
30 feet
20
up, 20, 30, no, maybe 30 feet by
30
standard,
feet.
Yeah. 50 feet per floor is the standard.
Have the barrister ask how far she has seen Soluun fall before and catch himself without being injured.
How high he's jumped as well.
Yeah.
Oh, Soluun is magnificent. He is the star of the show. Why, his ability to flip in midair and grab a wire above his head is you must come to the show and see it. You absolutely must come. He is astounding. He can take great leaps.
He is, how you say, très magnifique.
Yes, pretty much.
Have the barrister will ask if she has ever seen Soluun handling the weapon before, either at the request of Mr. Thundros or without.
No, sir, I have not seen it.
Has Soluun had any issues? Like, does Soluun have anybody that he's had any issues with, in that regard? Does he have any enemies or anybody that he doesn't get along with?
I would not know, sir. He's been quite proper with me.
In that same vein, since the two of them work so closely together, has he ever expressed or demonstrated any distaste for other types of elves or even half-elves?
She kind of wets her lips just a little bit before she answers. She says, "He seems to be able to work with me, sir, and as you see, I am of half-elven descent."
The barrister will ask if there is anything more. How should I phrase it? OOC, I want the barrister to ask, basically, if they are intimate.
No, sir.
Yeah.
Can I insight check that?
I wanted the insight
And the
about
other
her being half elf.
barrister will stand up rush forward very violently and say, "Objection, Your Honor! This witness is not the defendant. She has nothing to defend for her honor." And the magister will rap his staff on the floor twice.
I wouldn't have gone that path. Unless you're trying to make it crime of passion, but no.
No, I was trying to not have the barrister ask it. Yeah, I was trying to ask you guys how I should phrase it, so immediately overruled.
Okay.
But anyway, she says she's half elf. Is she actually wearing that hood?
No, I said she pushed her hood back as she came forward, and that you could see that there were some elven features to it.
Okay, well, in that case, I would like the barrister to ask, he seems to be able to work with you. Does that imply that there has been some tension in the past, or that yours is only a working relationship? Is there no friendship to be had there?
Well, I don't count him as one of my enemies, but there's sometimes our professional things that occur with anyone. I imagine I've had my arguments with even Lord Zord himself. And the barrister will say no further questions, and the other barrister will stand up and go, "At any time, did you ever feel threatened at all by my client, Soluun? Did he in any way make you feel endangered or abused or in language or in physical attacks on your person?" "No, sir." He says, "That's all." And she is released at that time. All right. Well, then he calls one after the other, and their testimony is pretty much the same, so we'll just go through with one. He calls members of the guards. Each of you give me a perception roll to see if you recognize these individuals as the ones of the night. Cashin definitely does with a 19. Epiphany was paying attention to other things with a 9. Nokri was in the bar trying to soothe Haldar. So was Aurelian was off consoling Cashin. Yeah, so
damn it.
I don't suppose Varys gets a...
No, we weren't there at that night.
Wait, so the only one... Well, actually, this kind of makes sense, because he is a former guard, and he would probably recognize them on sight.
Hey, Jeff, you still owe me 20 gold.
But at the same time, the only one who recognizes the guards from that night is the guy who's bleeding on the floor.
Apparently as he was carried, restored, and was staggering through, being carried to the inn to be tended to. He apparently recognized the guards, and something just went.
I lost the plate.
So, are these the same guards from that night?
They are. You do recognize them as being guards. There were more than these guards, but you do recognize these two as being members of that group.
Okay.
The opposing barrister steps forward, asks for his name, ranks, practically serial number, how long he served, whether he's a native of Waterdeep, etc., etc. On the guard, he gets the usual kinds of guards answers, very rigid sort of answers. He asks him if he was in attendance at the event of the night, and the guard gives a very perfunctory list of they were called to the scene. They were not present when the actual attack occurred, but they observed, they took into custody a man that was accused of attempted murder, identifies Soluun as that individual, points out each of you when the barrister asks if they recognize who so-and-so is. They are correctly identify each of you as members of that, correctly identify the Mule Skull Tavern owner as who he is. They also give a very precise description of a hole in the wall in the building opposite the Mule Skull, next to the Mule Skull, and that it was the plaster was chipped off approximately 4 inches in diameter and approximately 2 inches deep in the wall, as if struck by some kind of heavy object.
You said plaster? I thought it was like stone.
It's plastered stone.
All right.
But it was substantial material, and it was knocked off 4 inches across and 2 inches deep.
So basically, perfectly matching Epi and Rel's description.
Exactly. And then the barrister asks, when he interviewed each of the persons in question, what weapon were they carrying? And he describes precisely each of your weapons: a hand crossbow for Relian. Epiphany carry a staff.
It was actually a light crossbow.
All right. He describes Cashin's sword. He describes Nokri's hammer, and does also very precisely. And the barrister then says, have you ever attended any other crime scene where any sort of heavy weapon such as a hammer was used that might have struck plaster? And he says, yes, I've seen several such scenes. He asks him to describe the damage that was done. He would describe a large hole being knocked in the wall and cracks radiating out from it. The barrister would then ask him, was the damage on the wall consistent with being struck by a hammer in your experience? And he said, although it had some unusual qualities, it would not be out of the limits of the damage that he had seen when struck by a hammer. He then would stop his question and go to cross-examination. And one of the first things that your barrister would ask would be, had he attended any of the previous crime scenes for the murders in the dock wards, would ask him to describe in detail the hole in the head of the skulls. The one guard had attended one of the murders, both of them had attended another one, and the second guard had attended one murder. Pretty much both of them are saying the exact same things. They had both seen one of the murders, and individually they had been in the group that had seen some of the others. They describe the hole in the head. They describe similar damages and various things in it, and they give a time frame of the murders that prior to the event in question. In this court case, the previous murder had occurred 3 days prior to this event, and that there had been the murders have occurred over a 10-day period, a week. 10 days a week in this world, and that the other 3 murders had occurred 3 days prior to this attempt, 2 days prior to that, and then 1 day prior to that. So basically, over the course of the 3 days, they had occurred. Over the course of the 10-day, they had occurred.
Okay.
And he makes a point that the previous murder had occurred. He asks him again. So 3 days prior to this, another murder occurred, and he makes a point of that thing, and then stresses that others had occurred prior to the 3 days. Anything else you wish your lawyer to question him with?
Yes. Sorry, excuse me. How big would they say was the whole damage at the Mule Skull Tavern, the one that was left because of it missing its mark?
She described in detail 4 inches in diameter and 2 inches deep, a cone.
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I got lots of questions. And then roughly how big is Nokri's hammer, if she is willing to relinquish it to the barrister for showing the size of it?
Of course, it's not in the. It would be held at the doorway. How big would you say Nakri's hammer was?
At least the hammerhead.
Yeah, how big?
Because like, is this like a one-handed hammer or is this a big two-handed hammer?
Does not. I'm asking Lynn. Can't hear you, Lynn.
Yeah, sorry, partially muted. I mean, it could be used both. The warhammer could be used both ways. How big was the hole that they said for the thing?
4-inch
4 inches in
diameter.
diameter, 2 inches deep.
I mean, given that most of you guys have seen her fight, you think she could do a little bit better than 4 inches of damage?
Well,
that's not the question.
That
The
does,
question
that
is,
doesn't help you.
how big is the hammerhead?
I'm going to ask you, Seeley, how big you would say it.
Yeah.
Would you say like this? Let me take my hand off the button just a second.
One second, hold on.
Warhammers, like medieval warhammers, like in super fantasy, are pretty big. Like, you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see. I'm just trying to get a picture of, like, what it would look like to me, real quick, so I can give a more accurate description.
And I guess I should also ask for the like, this would have been part of the questioning for the hole that was made. Like, is it a complete circle? Is it trapezoidal or not trapezoidal, but like, is it not asymmetrical?
He said it was a circle, 4
Right.
inches in diameter, cone-shaped
Right.
damage, 2 inches deep.
Okay.
And
In that
and some
case,
cracks
is the
they
war
did.
is the warhammer a flathead or is it?
It's the middle. It's the middle picture of that whole description. That's
I
pretty
can't
much the
look at
exact.
it.
She can't see it. It's
it's,
basically
It's
a big
it's-
mallet.
Yeah.
Think like a Warcraft dwarf hammer.
Yeah. So basically a two-headed flat hammer. There's no spike on it.
Yeah. So
He would have seen the weapon. He probably would avoid this line of questioning because it probably could come too close to looking like something that could do the damage to the wall. So your lawyer would probably avoid that.
the thing is that looking at the hammer though, it won't make that kind of damage
Yeah.
to the wall. If
Yeah.
because like
It would have
looks like
made, it would have made a larger hole.
it would have
Well-
made both a larger hole and it wouldn't have made what would be considered a spike because there is no spike on the hammer.
Yeah, it's
Well,
flat
this
on
is-
both ends.
This
no
is
spike.
more like the kind of damage that it strikes and a big chunk is knocked out, kind of cone shaped. Not like the weapon was
But-
cone shaped, but more like the wall was. I mean, think about it. The
But-
bullet
but
isn't
even that-
cone shaped either. So it's
But
That
even
wouldn't have
that,
been able
that
to make that
the
impact,
hole
though.
that was made in the wall is too small for the hammer
I
to
don't know,
have made damage.
do we want to start going into like the other murders? Like, in the guards' experience, because they're experienced martial people, like, do we want to ask, you know, in your professional weapon trained opinion, what weapon caused the hole?
Yeah.
Also,
I would
sorry.
say that he would ask, in his professional opinion, having attended murder, he will first ask him if he has ever had a murder which was done by a hammer, in which a person was beat to death, struck by a hammer, which the guard will answer yes. And he will ask him, in your experience with those murders, was the hole that you found in these recent murder victims consistent with the damage done by a hammer? And he will answer no.
There we go. That's good.
I have to help with the train of the whole thing. The night of the apprehension of Soluun, when you came up to take him from Epiphany and Nakri, was Nakri even holding her weapon? Because I had grappled the dude. It wasn't drawn.
Yeah, he will ask if who had drawn weapons that night, and he will specifically say that it looked as if Cashin had drawn his weapon, that Relian and Epiphany had drawn their weapon, but that Nakri...
No, I had not.
Okay.
I used spells that entire night.
Okay, I thought you tried one of your shots with him.
No.
Okay. But he will just give an accurate description of those who had their weapons out at the time of his arrival. And he will also be asked if he was one of the two guards will be asked if that one was the one who confiscated the device in evidence from Soluun, and they will say yes. They will be asked if they have ever seen such a weapon before, and they will say no.
Ooh, question. Also, when they retrieved the weapon, was it warm?
The guard that was currently on the stand who took the weapon will consider and go, well, I did not handle it by the pipe area, but it seems to me that perhaps it could have been a little warm, yes.
Was there any sort of smell, like smoke?
Anything
The smell of
unusual.
it, the smell of it would have been in there.
fire.
Yeah, was there any like powder smell? Cannon powder smell, sort of smell.
There is a little bit of a consideration on the guard's part, and he says, yes, I believe there was a bit of a sulfuric smell in the air, as if a cannon had been fired.
You're not doing it right, Apple. You're supposed to go, oh, there you go.
You both need to have your beard shaven for that.
Considering that we're the only ones on camera dancing, just
Okay. When the barrister steps back, the other barrister comes forward immediately and says, in your estimation, he repeats a little bit, was the damage on the wall consistent with that of a hammer? The guard will say, under the right circumstances, it could be considered to be consistent with a hammer. And he says, the fact that the persons in question were not holding their weapon when you interviewed them, does this automatically say that the weapon had not been used previously? And the guard would simply say, I would have no way of knowing. It is possible that it could have been. It is possible that it could not have been. Let's see, there was one other question I wanted him to ask. I can't remember, so I'll just...
Does he look it in the toupee?
He'll step back at that point, say no further questions, and the guard's line of questioning will be over. And at that point, he will finally put Mr. Soluun Xibrindas on the stand, have him state his name, full name, his employment with the circus, the fact that he travels with the circus, and so forth. And he will ask him for his rendition of the night in question. And this
I actually have a question. Would I recognize him from prior to 3 days? Having been in this town for as long, or having been in what
that
for
would
as
be
long as I
a
am.
role of whether you happen to be in the right place at the right time to have seen him in the right bar or the right establishment.
What would I roll? History?
More like probably like a D100 or something.
Yeah, it would be more like a percentage of the chance that you would run across him in a big city. I will give you, if you roll above a 60% on a D100, I will say that you may have seen him prior to the 3 days.
Above 60.
Oh!
99.
You definitely saw him.
I would say maybe we spoke about this with the barrister beforehand.
Right.
You had seen him, not with the weapon necessarily, doesn't mean anything. You hadn't seen him with the weapon. You had seen him with a stack or sheaf of papers on his arm, and he was visiting various taverns in the city.
When exactly was he there in the city?
Well, would be from what I remembered.
From what the shepherd remembers he saw him occasionally during the entire previous 10 days in question.
Okay.
Week in question. But he had seen the man moving about Waterdeep, going in and out of businesses and taverns with his sheep.
So before the ship docked.
Correct.
Yep.
All right, so that's his alibi gone.
If he says so. We don't know that yet.
Well, let's just let this play out at this point, because oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
After he finishes giving his name and essential statistics and details, and it is turned over to him to be able to testify, he says, I was assigned by Lord Zord to post circulars regarding the Sea Maiden's fair arrival for high harvest time. This has been my job in every city. I am the main attraction for the acrobatic performance, as was testified here, and so I often like to go about and make sure my performances are attended well. I often will climb buildings and jump from rooftop to practice as I go. This is not uncommon. As the guard is aware, on the night in question, I was in possession of the device here in question because I had retrieved it from the shop owner that testified. It was the device owned by Maestro Thundros. I had earlier picked it up and paid for it. I proceeded to the Mule Skull Tavern because I was going to distribute the circulars there. I noticed as I came tumbling across the rooftops that there were several rather unusual individuals that seemed to be secreting themselves in the alleyway and the buildings surrounding the Mule Skull Tavern. Curious, and I might add a bit suspicious, because there have been numerous murders of my elven kin in the Dock District. So I attempted to move closer. The large dragonborn there, and he points at Nokri, and a half-elven, Mr. Haldar, I believe, the one that is identified there, came from the direction of the Mule Skull Tavern entrance. I edged closer, worried that the group meant to harm the man. I mean, we are all distressed with what has been occurring. And in so doing, I caused one of the roof tiles to dislodge, and it fell slightly. I turned to jump from the roof, being startled, but I realized that these perpetrators, objection, there is no criminal intent put on my clients. They are not perpetrators of anything. Oh, yes, well, pardon me, after the staff raps 2 times. Well, these individuals had noticed me, and I heard this loud banging noise that came from the direction of the Dragonborn, and at the same time I was so startled that I stumbled over the roof and I discharged Maestro Thundro's weapon. Now, luckily there was no projectile in the weapon, but not knowing how to properly use it, I struck it on a tile, and it had caused a spark in the wick, I assume, and it caused the fire powder inside to go off. I was most distressed, and I came tumbling down from the roof because I was so startled when it discharged in my hand. I tried to stop it. I didn't know if it would go off again, and I tried to stop it, and I fumbled with it and finally stuck it in my cloak. By then, these individuals were attacking me. That one there, and he points to Cashin, he was on me, attacking me, came from behind as I tried to flee. I fled for my life as fast as I could. But it was terrifying, and I glimpsed others jumping from their hiding places among the buildings. They were moving towards the sailor, and this one moving towards me, so I just ran. He came up from behind and struck at me, so I swung with my swords, and luckily I downed him. Oh, it was a harrowing experience, I must tell you. And he clearly identifies Cashin as the man that attacked him. And the barrister says, let the record show that he identified Cashin on the things. And then he says to continue. I continued to attempt to flee, but others of the group attacked me with spells, Your Honor, spells. It was terrible attacks on my person. By this time, noises or whatever had attracted the gardens, who ran into the alleyways, luckily saving me from any further destruction, or I surely would have been counted among the dead of the dock ward, I am quite sure. This gang of thugs accused me. Objection! Rap, sustained.
Seriously.
Refrain from coloring your testimony with inflammatory remarks. Well, that group of attackers accused me of being the cause of it all and convinced the guard to arrest me into custody, where I've been subject to vile accusations and heinous treatment ever since. Objection. Sustain. Your treatment while in lawful detention has no bearing on the actions of the night in question. And his barrister says, do you know who it was who first attacked you again? And he made it very clear that it was Cashin. Very well. And you in no way attempted to fire at Mr. Heldar at any time? No, sir, not at all. Your witness, and he says with smoke and smoke.
I have a question.
We have so many
we have a
questions.
lot of questions. I just wanted to get off the table right away on when he arrived at Waterdeep for his job.
Would
That's the only
Varys
question right now.
Yeah, let's. Hold on. Let's do it one at a time. Your barrister would immediately say, "Sir, when did you first arrive in Waterdeep? Since the ship's docked only 3 days hence." And he will say, I arrived 12 days ago with the intent of distributing the circulars.
Did he have the device in question?
He will answer no. He will say that he had the device in question only.
Insight check.
Yeah, anybody can.
Can I ask one more question and then we'll go to Lynn?
Yeah,
No,
anybody that wants to
Mine.
insight check can go ahead. Cashin did a 12.
Yeah, I'll go inside again.
Varys,
I need
My
advantage because he's accusing me of bullshit that's not true.
Shepard's actually starting to believe he might be innocent.
Yeah.
Varys basically snorts and says quietly to his parents who are sitting next to him in the courtroom, says basically BS. He says he's lying through his teeth. Cashin shakes his head back and forth and looks at you and goes, he's lying. And even Epiphany can see that he stuttered just a little bit on that answer.
If
Sorry.
I could put one question in.
Go ahead.
If the weapon, if you had retrieved the weapon from the smith and were taking it to the maestro, why was it also loaded with powder and a wick? Should that not have been with the maestro? Because it was taken to be repaired, not to be used.
Considering it's his weapon and he's the only one who has the materials to fire it.
So why would it have falsely discharged, basically?
He would say, I assume it was in there at the time when I picked it up.
So the implication is that the smith put it in there.
How convenient.
Even though the smith said he'd never seen anything like it before.
And
Exactly.
wouldn't have the materials to actually repair it. Oh!
Exactly.
All right. So, what other questions do you wish? And by the way, Rel,
guess
you got a high roll on
Soluun-
insight too.
Does Soluun have anyone else to corroborate his version of events?
Well, not in my travels for delivering the circulars, if that's what you mean.
I would.
I would be able to have several of the tavern owners speak to that on my behalf. I believe you already heard one of the tavern owners saying that he had seen me this one here had seen me 2 days prior to the incident that we're here about, that I had been in there talking a bit about it.
I would follow up that last question with the weapon that he said that the blacksmith repaired. If he is implying that the blacksmith, who had previously testified that he had no knowledge of the weapon, had also prepared this weapon with the powder and wick.
With materials he said he didn't have.
Ammo.
Well, we don't know anything about the ammo, just the powder.
Well, no,
because he's the one that specified powder and wick.
Yeah, we don't have evidence from the guards. We didn't ask them if there was a projectile retrieved.
Yeah.
Or if there were
So I'm only asking the question that's relevant.
Okay.
So if he's implying the blacksmith who had no knowledge, who had testified about having no knowledge of the weapon, had supplied him with materials of this weapon he had no knowledge of.
But wait, sorry, just to add on to that, because if it was fired, it had to have been loaded, correct?
No,
At
least
powder.
Not necessarily.
Powder.
Okay, so we'll stick with powder.
He's saying because we didn't jump on the fact that there would have been a projectile. He's just saying it had the powder and the wick, and we don't have anything from the guards saying that there was projectiles.
Yes.
Impact from the wall.
Ask another question at some time. Ask the Soluun to reinstate, reaffirm whatever that that Nokri had swung her. Did he say that Nokri had swung her hammer?
She made a booming noise.
Then have the barrister ask Soluun if he saw what made the hole on the wall next to Nokri and Saldar.
Okay,
It was Aurelian is what it was.
So Gore's first though. Sorry.
Okay. Regarding now, so he is asking if he therefore states that the smith must have loaded the pistol, and he kind of shrugs and says, "That's the only place I can think of that would have loaded it."
And then after he says that, I look back at the blacksmith to get a reaction from the blacksmith.
He's frowning.
He's frowning. Okay.
So let the court show that the court, or that the blacksmith denies this implication.
No, give the whole proceedings time.
All right.
And then the second one, the second question that Varys was putting in was what?
Have the barrister ask if Soluun had seen what had made the hole that suddenly appeared above Relian's head?
Or the booming noise that came from Nokri. Like, did he see what she did to make that noise?
And the barrister will ask, did you at any time see the wall struck by any of the plaintiffs with any device, any weapon? Did you see how the wall was damaged in any way? And he will say, no, I was running for my life.
Insight.
Hold on.
I got it running.
You don't even have to insight that. You know for a fact that he wasn't running.
He just said. So the barrister for the barrister's question, you just said that you were investigating or observing them, and now you're saying that you were running from them at the point of this. Because he said that he was observing them at first. He didn't start running until after they went after him, and they didn't know about this if that noise just happened.
Well,
there's a quick change in this.
As you yourself have seen from Mr. Relian, this all happened in a very brief span of time. I stumbled, I fell, the tile fell at the same time. People jumped at Mr. Heldar there, and there was a sound, and then my weapon went off, and everything was just happening all at the same time.
But you just testified that you were on the roof at the time of the sound happening, and now you're telling me that you were running away as the sound was happening.
Yes, I attempted to get away over the roof, slid and fell down, and then had to run.
Before the sound, was there a reason to flee before the sound occurred?
They were looking up at me because I had made noise, and I was afraid they were going to kill me.
But you just testified
All
that
of our
they didn't notice you and that they were currently watching over Heldar.
No, I said that I was up there, I made noise, several of them turned to look up at where I was, and one of them clearly saw me. I turned to try and run, fell, I set off the gun, and there was noise, and I slid and fell to the ground, and they chased after me, and it all happened within a matter of less than half a second.
I've got a quick question. So, when exactly did the circus claim they arrived in town?
3 days
Circus
ago.
arrived 3 days ago.
3 days ago. At
He
what
came,
time
he
of
came
day?
earlier.
At what time of day?
I will say maybe like noon.
Noon. Okay. 3 days ago, when did Soluun deposit the weapon?
He deposited the weapon. That would be a question that yours would ask. When did he take it to the smith? He would have taken it. He would say that he took it to the smith on whatever date that would fall on the morning after the previous murder. So yeah, that one clearly looks. The time is open. He took it to the smith the morning after the previous murder had occurred.
So before the circus arrived?
Yeah, he had the gun in his possession while he was in
Okay, well, point that out then. That he claimed he did not have the weapon until the circus and the maestro arrived, and yet the records
No.
clearly show
Well,
that his
the barrister will ask about that, but he will say no, the weapon was given to him when they docked up the coast so that he could go and have the weapon repaired in time for their appearance.
Oh, how
in
very convenient.
Why
so
did he?
had it
Hold
the
on,
whole
hold
10
on.
days.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Why did he have the? So he had the weapon the whole time he was here.
Well, that's where he
And only
he
had
did
it
not say
3
that.
days ago.
Yeah,
We've caught him in a lie then.
No, he's actually. This is the one
No.
part he's telling the truth about. He arrived 12 days ago. He is being honest that he had the weapon in his possession at that time. What has not been asked yet is, and the barrister will ask him. He would say, "Why did you wait so long to take the weapon to the repairman?"
That's what I meant.
And
Yeah.
he will say, "Because I didn't think it would be a long repair, and I was very busy taking the circulars around to all of the businesses in town."
I have a question for him from the barrister. It's a two-parter question. The first one is, in your professional opinion as a trapeze artist, how important is balance?
Tremendously important, sir, and you have caught me in a great embarrassment.
Then why did and he would have the barrister bring the device over and say, "Could you tell me how heavy this is?"
He would lift it and he would say, "Well, I suppose it is about a pound or a pound and a half in weight."
If you are performing your act, how off kilter would that sort of a weight make your performance?
Oh, quite off weight, and I imagine that is part of why I fell so very clumsily that night.
And
I got something for that.
yeah, if one of you guys could.
Partner.
So why were you carrying so many other equipment, like your 2 swords as well, if you knew that that was going to be making
One
you
sword
very
at a
clumsy?
time.
2 swords.
He had two.
He had two.
One on each hip. Balance
Yeah.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
it
was-
balances out, but
it's still extra
if he's going to pass around circulars and he's going to jump around and he's going to go parkouring training, why does he have his swords on him?
Yeah. Why is he
Very
jumping around on
simply.
rooftops if he knows that?
I am The answers are twofold. I was jumping on rooftops to practice for my performances. Do the swords hinder me somewhat? Yes, of course, they would do so. But as you are so aware, there had been murders during this period of time, and I wish to defend myself. It is quite evident with what we have heard of testimony here that I needed to defend myself. I carried my swords, and did they cause me to stumble and not be as dexterous as I should have? Absolutely, or I probably would have escaped these thugs. Objection, Your Honor.
Yep.
And again,
You like screaming at yourself, Ruth?
Question. He's a full drow, correct?
yes.
All of the targets have been half-elven. Where was the threat to you?
Oh no, not all of them have been half-elven. There was one full elf killed.
And how do you know that?
It was the talk of the town.
Does anybody else remember a full elf being killed in all this?
Nope, only half.
No, I remember only half elves.
Actually,
Yeah.
I remember saying it was elvenkind. That it was elvenkind.
Well, I thought it was all half-elven.
No, there were two half elves and one full elf. I do remember Mr. saying that.
But I do have the question of why would he try to fight when he's obviously much better at escaping?
Basically, that's a non-question. He obviously testified that he tried to escape. You attacked him from the back, correct or not? Right. You see, his story is he tried to get away. You attacked him from the rear. He had to swing and defend himself because he couldn't move forward. Yes, you can see all the holes in this. You guys can, of the fact that if he's this acrobatic person, he should have been able to have done other things, but he's doing.
I've had a question. Why did he continue to fight and continue to attempt to flee when the guards arrived on the scene and ordered everyone to stop?
Because I was still being attacked by these citizens.
Did we ever give a description about how he was apprehended?
You said that there was a light struggle as the guards were disarming Soluun.
Yeah, basically, you had him. You were sitting on him or whatever. You had him.
No, I grappled him.
Grappled. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You had him grappled. And you turned him over to the guards, and he did a little bit of struggle trying to get away, but finally acquiesced to the guards.
I got another question. Well, probably a two-parter. What was he currently doing at that night, at the time that he made it to that rooftop?
He was he said that, practicing on his way to deliver the flyers.
The circulars. Please. So, why was he doing it at this specific time in the dead of night where there's less business going on and not, say, the daytime when he could get more flyers out?
He's a drow. So he's got some sensitivity. It was like, I think a corollary to that would be, why was he doing his practice in this specific area? Knowing that it was dangerous.
He basically said already that it was common for him to jump from roof to roof and practice getting up and down and doing.
But why in the dock ward?
Why this neighborhood specifically? If he knew that it was dangerous, why was he doing it here?
He would answer that he had to deliver these circulars to a set number of places, and that the taverns in the dock ward were on his list of taverns that had to be have the poster tacked up.
So why not do that at a different time? If he knew it was unsafe at this time.
He is drow.
He
only does.
Well, yeah, I know light sensitivity, but like maybe closer to dusk or closer to dawn.
Okay, can I say something? We're kind of continuing. Yeah, we're kind of continuing arguments that Ms. Ruth has already stated that doesn't hold up. There are many possible reasons why he chose this time. He's a drow. He doesn't like bright light.
That's right. And the answer would be that he had been distributing them all during the night.
Another reason could be, like, why was he doing it in this area? Well, it's the dock ward, and his circus ship is docked in the dock ward. He's close to home. Like,
Yeah.
I will, however, ask I would have the barrister ask. Your partner said you, while not friendly, you are able to tolerate others of elven blood. Would you say that's correct? Have you ever come into conflict with any other of your kinfolk?
Well, sir, occasionally I do. I would be lying if I said I did not at some time have issue with others of the elven kin. However, I sometimes have issues with Dragonborn humans. I mean, I'm a drow, sir, and there are certain issues that we have, but it does not constrain itself to merely my kin.
Can you remember the last argument you had with someone of elven blood?
Well, I would suppose that that might possibly, and he looks over at Mr. Zord, and he says, I would imagine that would be the argument that I had with one of the performers where we had it. He was actually another drow, sir.
What was the argument about?
Scheduling times of performances, and I am afraid I felt that he had the priority schedule of the time.
Do we need to insight check him?
Actually, I'm going to ask.
No.
And where is that performer now?
I assume he's on board the ships.
I know we're missing a key linchpin to just knock this guy out of the park, and it's.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm trying to
missing
think,
it.
like, what.
In the interest of time, because we're running pretty long tonight and trying to
Sorry.
finish this up tonight, I'm going to say at this point there has been quite a bit of evidence posted both ways. Nothing really that hard.
No hammer strike.
So the two lawyers go into their closing arguments mode. The plaintiff lawyer stands before the judges, and his argument is, magistrates one and all, this case is one of the most obvious of my career. Numerous crimes had been, during the previous 10-day prior to the night in question, been perpetrated upon the persons of the sailors of elven blood. Evidence is presented by our witnesses, and Mr. Heldar himself have indicated a high probability of the Mule Skull Tavern being a target for the murderer. As testified, none of our witnesses had any knowledge of nor proximity to the areas in this time. In fact, they were dispatched by none other than the city's esteemed Volo Gedarm to rescue one of our noble's own sons and his comrade from the very clutches of the vile thugs of the underworld, and they did so with admirable results. They could not have been party to the murders of the previous days. They were notified by business associates in a likewise manner that there had been a dangerous individual in the dock ward, and at great risk to themselves they set out, with a former guard member, I might add, to attempt to find persons to employ in their new tavern. This risk cannot be overlooked, that they would do so, and they certainly would defend themselves at the cost of. Mr. Xibrindas was carrying, as it is now evident, and clearly discharged, as he himself has testified, a dangerous magical device, one which he does not deny carrying, nor does he deny familiarity with having had it for a period of nearly 12 days. Mr. Xibrindas was arrested and found guilty of fist assaults in his previous visit to the city, for which he paid fines at that time. It is clear that he has certain issues with members of the citizenry. I urge the magistrates to impose penalties to the highest degree on this dangerous man before he carries out more crimes against Waterdeep and her citizens. I thank you. And then the defense thing, the defense lawyer gets up and says, "My lords and ladies of the magistrate, what has been made clear from this testimony, if anything has in this most odd case, is that my client was out in the city in lawful operation of his duties as ordered by Lord Zod himself." Zord, not Zod. Lord Zord himself. Well, the fact...
Only Zod.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Aye, Zordon.
God.
Zord. While the fact that he chose to include practice aerobatics in the course of these duties might rightly be considered odd for a normal person, but is by no means odd for his occupation. We have authored testimony that he had picked up an uncharged thunderer from the smith that very evening. The show device was likewise confiscated from my client. To confer that because he carried an entertainment tool and was on the rooftops may seem at first glance to be incriminating, but as we have clearly demonstrated, there was nothing truly underhanded involved. In fact, if anything is to be conferred from the evidence which we have presented, it is that my client, Soluun Xibrindas, interrupted a planned crime by the supposed plaintiffs upon the person of the sailor Mr. Heldar. Evidence at the site is consistent with a wall being struck by a large object, which, as it turns out, is exactly the type of weapon carried by the individual who clearly lured Mr. Heldar from the tavern. All sounds described by testimony are consistent with the sound of a hammer being swung and striking a wall. Mr. Heldar should be relieved that there are concerned individuals like Mr. Xibrindas to prevent such heinous crimes, or he too might have been counted among the dead elven last week in the dock ward. No, I shall be the first to admit that it is not clear that the plaintiffs were themselves the dire attackers of elves, but let us review the evidence. This group lured the elf, probably against his own better judgment, from the tavern. The members of the, well, need I say, gang, lay concealed in an alleyway which Lady Nocris conveniently led Mr. Haldar down. There was damage consistent with a large hammer which is carried by Lady Nocris. The group attacked an innocent witness to the crime, my client, and attempted to kill him. My client has no reason whatsoever to attack either Mr. Heldar, whom he did not know, nor the plaintiffs. Since his earlier fights, admittedly with a couple of elves a year ago, he has been naught but an exemplary citizen. It is not my client who should be found guilty of crimes, my lords, but those who falsely accused him. I thank you.
This guy's going on the list.
Yeah. The lords retire for a period as you guys are up and moving around for about an hour. The lords are out in the deliverance chamber. What would you be doing, any or all of you, during this period of time? Free to talk during this time.
Cashin would just be with the group as close as he can be, while also just eyeing Xibrindas and his defense team.
I'm going to give them no satisfaction of looking at them at all. I'm going to hold myself with the utmost decorum of a noble of my stature, and simply turn to Epiphany and go, "You surprise me so much." And she's just going to reach up and just pat both sides of his face.
Eventually, the lords return and take their places with the main magister remaining standing, and he raps his staff on the ground 5 times markedly and says, "May it please the court, we have found that the only charge for which we can clearly find Mr. Xibrindas guilty, with the evidence presented, is disturbing the peace with aggravated charges. We order a 300 dragon fine to be paid by the defendant, Mr. Xibrindas, to the plaintiffs for injuries upon their persons, and another 200 dragons payable to the city for activities improperly leading to the employment of the city guards, courts, and to the accidental discharge of the device in question. In addition, we order the confiscation of the show device known as the Thunderer for being an improperly registered dangerous item. The Thunderos leaps from his seat at this point and is pulled back to his seat by Lord Zord. We will fine Lord Zord and the Sea Maidens Fair 1,000 dragons for their part in allowing a potentially dangerous device into the city without proper supervision and registration. As we are aware that Lord Zord has already formally deposited said 1,000 dragons with the Justice Treasury in advance for said mishandling, this fine is hereby declared null. In addition, we restrict Mr. Xibrindas from re-entering the city after being removed from these proceedings for a period of no less than 1 year. He is not to appear in this year's Sea Maidens Fair. There's a lot of mumbled disagreement on the other side. Lord Zord looks up at the magistrate. I encourage you and the maestro to consider yourselves lucky this did not blow into something far worse. It was due to a degree of lack of judgment that your employee was embroiled in this matter. Please accept such losses as may exist for this fair and exercise far better judgment in the future. Case closed. Bang. He bangs his staff down on the floor, and the group of the 5 judges get up and depart the court. The bailiff comes over and deposits 300 gold, 300 dragons with the barrister for the damages of his client. So that would be divided 6 ways because of Haldar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah. So.
I want to do something so cheeky.
I'm
That'd
tempted.
be 50 each then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except due to knowing that Heldar basically lost his job with the ship he was supposed to be on due to this, Cashin is going to give his 50 gold to Heldar.
Heldar looks very startled and thanks you very much. Hi, sir, I'm going to have to find new employment with another ship.
He can always Knocker will lean over and go, you are always more welcome to work with us until you find another ship like it. At least we can try to keep you employed and paid until then.
I just may take you up on that, milady. I will need some kind of employment. I can run errands for you or whatever you need, but I would appreciate a bit of employment. And the group on the other side, guards, everybody are slowly filing out of court. As Thundros and Soluun and Zord pass by you, Zord just kind of looks over he's a very handsome man, outstandingly handsome, a real lady killer kind of handsome, and he just looks over at the group of you and says, Trollskull Tavern, you say? I will have to come by and join in the festivities. And he smiles at you beautifully.
Actually, I'm going to turn to him and smile back. Just to keep things on a civil matter, I would be more than happy to invite you if I didn't feel your man was telling lies.
Oh, but my dear,
No.
he
No,
has-
no, no, no. I am not done with you, good sir. You and only you. Your troop may stay with the ship. If you are not accepting of that, you are more than not welcome to my establishment.
a true pity. Well, and I so wanted to bring a dash of spark to the festivities. Well, you are welcome at
All the more reason for
at
you
the
to stay away.
you are welcome at my circus anytime. I will be happy. In fact, and he
Bonus
procures
action.
I would be
5 tickets and hands them over to anybody if you wish to accept them. If you don't, he just lets them fall to the ground.
Bonus
Actually, hold on.
action.
Okay,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I will happily take them in hand. Smile. Let the acid drip right onto the tickets and melt them right in front. Do tell your man that black dragon bones are acidic, not thunderous. And she's just going to give the most like, bitch, don't fuck with me look. Pardon the French.
Bonus action. Connection. to Lord Zod.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't push this.
That's risky business.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Can't prove it though.
No. Yeah. No.
In which
As
case,
funny as it would be, I wouldn't do it.
Never mind.
Okay, because there would be a lot more going on if you did that than just connection. So, yeah.
I see all.
Didn't you attempt to do something of the sort? Somebody attempted to do some kind of understanding of who Lord Zord was when he first came into court.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Thought we talked about it, but I think we didn't do it.
Could be. I think the roll failed was what I remembered it being, the roll about him failed. But anyway, I'm going to have to call it there because we are way over our time.
Dang it.
But so you'll have to make notes to yourself if you got something you want to see handled next week or whatever. But to all the people slowly file out of court, Varys and his parents come and clap you on the back because you at least won a partial victory against them. And Volo gives you information about Lord Zord seeming to have a lot of power at his back, and to have won even this small victory is pretty impressive, and so forth. That he does.
It's the best we could have expected out of this cesspit of a city.
Frankly, yeah. I hope I wasn't over speaking on this one, but none of his people are invited into our tavern.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was
yeah.
suspicious.
Like we're aware that they're going to try to set fire to it, right?
Yeah, and I will be making sure so much is going to happen if they do.
Epiphany looks over at Volo.
Not now, Epiphany.
And whatever he's going to do, we'll have to wait for next week. Because I'm going to call it there. The excitement of the court date is over.
Courts can be fun especially if you're trying to help solve the mystery. It really is.
Yes. So
We didn't have a proper discovery period.
No voir dire. But yeah. But anyway, there's no jury here, so you can't do voir dire. But anyway, the interesting outcome of this thing, and we'll see how that plays out in the future. I guarantee, for those of you who know anything out there in Videoland about Autumn and Waterdeep, that they are going to see Lord Zord again in the future. We shall see what will happen.
He just better not cross Knocker, or he's going to really find out what kind of damage she's going to put in the wall with him. I'm sorry. You pissed her off so bad.
Next time will be our last episode prior to a 1-week break for Thanksgiving. Will you be here next week, Epiphany?
I will not be here on the 24th, and I will not be here on the 1st.
Right, the first
So the
we
first
will
I
not
think
be here.
off.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you won't be here on the 24th either. That's what I wanted to check.
And
So,
then-
so Epiphany
and
will
then-
go off following after Volo when he leaves the court.
Epiphany needs a snack.
We made more money with this than with you.
Wait. So for 2 weeks, Ro's going to be a solo act? I don't think I can cut it.
Well, just one,
Oh,
because
it'll
you
be
guys are
fun.
off for Thanksgiving. And then Are You Sure has a special, or is that a thing?
Yeah.
It
Brett?
is
We
a
were
thing.
working
It is indeed a
together.
thing.
Okay, so Are You Sure we'll have a guest one shot?
Yep, no other than the shepherd is going to do a DM of a one shot in the time slot for Are You Sure? So tune in next week at the Are You Sure time for a special episode one shot. Hope to see you
We're
there.
all dead!
See you
The other
then.
Saturday campaign.
Have fun,
Bye.
everybody, and start your own
Bye.
game.
Bye, everybody. Remember, today is the tomorrow that you worried about yesterday, but today should never be belittled because of a bad yesterday, because as we all know, tomorrow is never a guarantee.
And tomorrow
What?
never comes.
Right. Right.
Sorry.
Good night.
Seems legit.